So right up front, I wanted to have my contact information. And like we said, if time permits, we'll certainly try to answer any question we can. But some of these things that we're going to be doing and talking about are kind of in-depth projects and really in-depth topics, and we'll kind of dig real deep, and I'll be flipping back and forth to my project file. I'll be opening filters. I'll be even demonstrating some macros here and there. So if I go too fast and you can't really keep up and you had maybe a more detailed question on a certain topic, just email me. I'll get back to you and email you as well. So also I wanted to go ahead and include on there my Twitter and LinkedIn information. Feel free to connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, lots of great resources out there. And if I can give a quick plug for LinkedIn, 400 million people are using LinkedIn, in case you're not aware. So if you're not on LinkedIn, it's free by the way, set up a profile and you can connect with lots of other project people. As a matter of fact, on LinkedIn, there's lots of groups I belong to, and if I have a question or concern or something doesn't work quite right, I've gone to many forums and groups out there and asked, and people are very, very willing to help you there with LinkedIn. So I'm pretty sure most of you have sat in some webinars before, maybe some PMI webinars, perhaps some other MPEG webinars. Some are good, some not so good. I've been in them myself where I've kind of disappointed in some of them. So I wanted to include kind of a quote on the bottom here by one of my favorite business development gurus, Tom Peters. If you haven't heard of him, Google him. He's a really, really fascinating individual, and what he's always said, you can read the quote below, that, hey, if I spend 20 bucks and I learn one thing, it was worth it. So if we go through some of these tips, some tips at the beginning are pretty basic, and you may be just rolling your eyes, but bear with me as we go through some of this other things. We'll say, oh, that's kind of cool, and hey, even if you get one tip that you learned something, it was worth showing up. So that's kind of the quote of the day, so to speak. A lot of times when I'm doing presentations, whether at work or for PMI, I always like to talk about what I'm currently reading. So a book that I finished recently that I really enjoyed is called So Good They Can't Ignore You. It's by Professor Cal Newport. He's a professor at Georgetown University. He teaches computer science there. He has coined the phrase for something called career capital. And what that is basically something that you possess that makes you very rare and valuable to your organization. So that's kind of what we're building today. We're building career capital. You are trying to become the best project scheduler, the best analyst, learn this software. So we're building career capital as we look at this. So again, I'm going to kind of go back and forth from my slides and go through project as we look at these things. So lastly, some of these, quote, pains are some of the suggestions you gave. There was a number of questions before, and I've kind of incorporated some of them in here. But once again, if you're listening in or you've submitted a question, you think, wait a minute, he didn't answer my question, or wait a minute, you didn't really go into depth, just email me here and we'll talk about it. So before I go to pain number one, we do have a simple poll question. And Kyle, I believe you have the poll in front of you that we're going to ask which project version you're using.
Yeah, so I just launched that. You should see that on your screen now. Everybody can choose an option and submit that.
And by the way, Project 2016 is out.
Just give it a couple more seconds here, and then we'll close this and take a look at the results. All right, let's close this out and take a peek. You able to see that, Ed?
I cannot. Where can I see it here?
Take the controls back and...
got it.
Okay, you can...
Interesting, very interesting. Okay, so only 2% 2007, so most of you have graduated. It's funny, the people that I know that are using 2007 are government workers, and they're kind of slow. So that makes a difference. That'll make a difference in one of the things we're presenting, because I was going to show the difference between, it's a huge difference between 7 and 10, as you know, with 10 incorporating the ribbon and lots of different things we can do. So 66% using 13 and 30% with 10. So All right. Thanks for showing that. That helps. That's interesting.
No problem. And then I think you'll have to share your screen one more time here to get the control back.
Okay. Now are we back?
Perfect. Yep.
All right. Thank you very much, and thank you for that. So let's begin. Let's jump right into it to pain number 1. Now, yes, the title is the 12 Pains Project, but like a lot of things, if you set your project up properly, if you go through and look at the options and you have everything in front of you set up, it will alleviate a lot of your pain. I know you've used project and like me, you forget something like, oh, where'd that macro go, or where did that filter go, or where is that? I can't remember that shortcut. Well, what I do, I literally, on my office wall right here, I've got a project checklist. It may not look like this, but it's got little things that I look at, whether I'm an analyst. Sometimes maybe you are a schedule analyst. You look at schedules that some people send you, and you maybe run metrics on them or look at them to see how they're complete, see how the logic flows, or perhaps you create schedules from scratch. Either way, it's kind of nice to have a little checklist right in front of you to say, okay, did I do this? Did I set up my options right? Did I set up my bar styles? Do I have all my things in order? And it really does help. And certainly it'll be like second nature once you do it over and over, but it's kind of nice to have the project checklist. And also, as I receive some schedules in from different folks and different contractors and government agencies, I'm going through and I'm opening up their schedule and I'm trying to format it according to my needs in certain ways while I do that. So these are some of the things that I like to set up from the start, and we'll look at some keyboard shortcuts too. And also, not only do I want these slides available, you can certainly go to PMI eventually and look at the recordings and things, but I also want to give you my checklist, my keyboard shortcuts, and there's what I call SOPs, a standard operating procedure, for some of these step-by-step processes that we get a little deep in some of the macros and things. So I want to give those to you, and I really do. I have my project checklist posted on my wall, and I have a keyboard shortcuts posted on my wall that has 10 or 12 shortcuts that I usually use, and we'll go through there, and you'll say, oh, that's kind of neat. So it saves your time. Again, you're building project management career capital, so to speak. Now lastly, with the setup, not only do I have my references and checklists and things with me, but I usually keep a project book right by me, and there's plenty of project books out there. Certainly there's some out there for 2013 and 2016 books are actually out there. So it's a good thing to actually have a project book, and that's a good thing to research. Go to your Barnes & Noble, go to Amazon, look up some of these books, and I don't know if you can see really closely, but the author of Project 2010 Inside Out is Teresa Stover, and she is an MPUG member and has given webinars before. Connect with her on LinkedIn. Really nice lady, and it's just a good book to have as a reference. So what I want to do now is actually go into project and go over some of these things. We'll kind of look at my example file, and we'll just walk through some of this stuff. So my file is already open, and one of the things I used to do, I used to work for NASA, so this is a real schedule I used about 4 or 5 years ago, and the project's canceled, so I don't think anybody will care that we're actually looking at it. So like I said, what we want to do initially is just look at the options. I like to go through here to options and set this thing up. So a lot of people don't realize that you can certainly set up your certain view. If you have a view you set up, and we'll show you how to customize a view in here with different things. So you can choose whatever view you wish here to start off. Date format is another thing we'll look at. And so that's kind of our start there and our little display. One thing that always bugged me, and maybe you're wondering this too, I've noticed in like 2010 and 13 the entry bar isn't up and running from default. You have to actually choose it. So that's one of those things that gets on my nerves. I like to have the entry bar because it works a little bit more like Excel. I like to put that, so I'm going to go ahead and click the entry bar there. So schedule tab. What I like to do also is I like to do fiscal year with October starting. We'll keep with the default time, and that may come into portion in a future pane, so to speak. And my calculate function. This is on that keyboard shortcuts that I just showed you. What that does is I like to leave it off. Now, it's not a big deal if you leave it on, But if your files become very huge and clunky and you're running maybe a browser, and you're running PowerPoint, you're running Excel, and you're really running short on RAM, things start to lag. Every time you update things, you status, you create a new task, it takes a while. You see that the thing's clunking along and going really slow. So sometimes I just like to click that and click it off, and if you want to calculate, you just hit the F9 key and do that. So let's go ahead and we'll choose that and we'll turn it off. Proofing, save, advanced. I think we're good here. Now undo levels, what I like to do, I like to bump that up a little bit. 20 is the default. If you're like me and you've used Project a long time, you've made plenty of mistakes. I'm certainly guilty of that. And sometimes we screw stuff up so bad, the end date moves and we have some summary things that just completely go mad. We don't know what's going on, and macros aren't working, and the only formula and the only solution we have is just to shut it off. Well, that works, but also the undo is kind of nice. Now, I don't know if you've used Project 95 or 98 or I think Project 2000. There used to be one undo button. That was it. Literally, if you made a mistake and you could go back one step, that's all. You had to literally close it out. But now, thank goodness, there's an undo level. So you can bump that up as well. So that's something I like to bump up a little bit. Most of these other defaults I will keep. These are okay. I like to show my external and successors and predecessors. We'll look at a master project in one of these examples too. So that's what we want to do. So I think we're good here. Go ahead and click OK. And again, the entry bar is here. That's what I like to see. So I kind of looking through my checklist and maybe some other things I like, and this is just my preference. If your schedule's pretty long, and you can see here, this is about 6 or 7 years going out. So I like to change my Gantt chart calendar up front. I just kind of open it over here and change that. Maybe I want to go with 3 tiers. We'll go with years, go with quarters, and then months last. And this just makes the display much easier to read. Change that. And that's just easier to read so I can see my schedule. I can't see everything, and we can certainly scroll back and forth here. One of those things that I forget, and again, if you have your checklist and your keyboard shortcuts in front of you, which is funny, I'm guilty of this as well, is spell check. Now the spell check keyboard shortcut, and maybe you've used it in Word and Excel and PowerPoint, it's the same thing. It's the F7 function key. Well, in Word or PowerPoint, if you've misspelled something, it has that little red wavy underline, so you know you've misspelled something. Project, oh well, you know, can't really tell here. So run spell check before you publish your project. As I've said before, I'm guilty of this myself. I was literally in a meeting with some management folks, and I had misspelled somebody's name, or I'd misspelled an acronym or something here and there, and I just didn't run spell check. It's just one of those things you forget. You can just hit F7 and say, oh, look at that, I've misspelled algorithm. Horrible. So I'll just make sure that I've changed it. And, I misspelled generate too. How horrible. Well, that's somebody's name. That's okay. But nevertheless, spell check. That's just one of those things that you should always do when you're in your project, is just run spell check. So it's the F7 key for spell check. All right, and it's also, like many things in project, there's 5 or 6 ways to do it. So F7 keyboard shortcut, or if you go to the project file, click spelling. So like I said, the calculate function is kind of interesting. I like to turn that off, so let's just kind of mess around here. Let's change some things. Let's see, bump some things up or change something. So a lot of times, if it doesn't calculate, I can just hit F9 and it actually calculates my function. It either updates your status, it establishes your link. So those are a couple of keyboard shortcuts, and hopefully you utilize those. So that's kind of the first pane. Let's go back to our slides and look at pane number 2. So again, the example file that I showed you, it's like 411 tasks. It's not very big, again. So calculate function is not a big deal on 500 tasks. But There was a schedule I used for NASA that had 10,000 lines. It was huge. It was clunky. It was, oh good grief, I guess it was like 40 or 50 meg, and it took forever. So certainly having that calculate function off helped. But also when you're in a presentation or you're trying to find things and you have 4, 5, 6,000 lines, it's nearly impossible to find what you're looking for, or it takes forever. So a couple of keystrokes here. You're probably familiar with Control F. It works the same way in Word, works the same way in PowerPoint. Control F and you can find what you're looking for. A keystroke folks don't really know about in Project is Control G that we'll look at, and another keystroke is the function key. It basically unfilters everything, which is nice. So again, if you have your keyboard shortcuts in front of you, you've got all these. So let's just demonstrate these real quick, how they work. So like I said, Control F, you probably know this. So find what, if I want to find something, just type in what I want, and hey, look at that, I go right to CDR, and you can go up or down, and if you have an acronym, you can match the case and look for things there. But one thing, like I said, which is interesting, if I'm scrolling down, and I've been in meetings where I see people scroll down to line 500 and it takes forever, or they drag the cursor and, oh no, I've gone past it. So all you have to do is click Control G, and if I go to ID 200, and granted it's going to my IDs numbers based on this, click OK, and look at that. I'm at ID 200. That's just amazing. But this is exclusively for Project. If you go Control G, it will go to your specific field. Another interesting keyboard shortcut that saves you time, let's see, if I want to roll some of this stuff up, if I want to, I don't care about tasks that are done, let's filter that out. I don't care about all these big tasks, let's just see the low ones here. I get rid of all this and just show 0 and 1 duration. And so I've kind of reduced my files a little bit there. And maybe I want to just click on some other finished dates. If I want to close this and choose things from 2009 only, click OK, and I've gone further. So you can see I've got some filters on. And to save you time, instead of going back through and unfilter, 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 I can just hit the keyboard shortcut F3 and look at that. All my file is showing up. So again, if I just want to filter something out, just show tasks that are done maybe, and notice I have the filter on, just hit F3 and my entire file is showing. So some pretty cool stuff. Initially have your checklist you go through, set up your project file the way you want to, have some keyboard shortcuts set up for you, and be able to find things. So that's kind of where we are at the very beginning, and have everything set up. Now, maybe we should move on to something that you haven't seen before, or maybe you have a little bit, but what I want to look at now is pane number 3. Let's go back to our slide. Pane number 3, customizing bar styles. And this is another thing that is vastly improved in Project 2010. The bar styles, or the Gantt chart side of the project file, was pretty ugly, for lack of a better word. You could certainly do colors and have some strange looking patterns. You can even use icons and pictures and things. But what I like to do is I like to look at the Gantt chart, and especially for folks that don't know anything about Project, you're trying to show them a chart, maybe things that have slipped, you know, what things were for the baseline and what they are now, and you want to really show kind of where the progress is. So this is just an example of a bar style. Again, I have this on my wall. I have some bar styles that I like to do to kind of customize this. Now, I'm not going to spend the time and go through and do all these, but I'm going to do a couple real quick. I'm going to go to the bar styles, and it may come into some other topics as well. So let's go through and let's change a couple of things. And to get the bar styles, I just right-click here, go to bar styles, and let's change a couple of things here. Let me change to a slipped milestone. Format it a little bit here. We'll still use the same milestone shape. Choose the dash. Make it red. make it kind of a small shape, make that red. I'll do it for milestone. And we'll also make sure it's from baseline. We'll just go the baseline start and baseline finish. Let's see, let's do another one that we want to show a milestone that's completed. Fix my shape here. Choose green. Looks nice, so we just pattern, milestone. Let's do the finish, actual finish. Let's see what we have here. Calculating. All right, so we can see those milestones are showing up complete, and these are kind of showing as slipped. So once again, this is just my bar styles. Can right click and look at bar styles there. So that is some examples of bar styles, and you could certainly we could spend a lot of time here. We can go through, and if you want to make the summaries pretty, you can do different colors. You can show your critical path. You can show different things with summary progress and all those, which is kind of nice. So lots of different things you can customize your bar styles, so to speak. So that's another thing we can make and make our project file look a little bit prettier. All right, so going back to the slide again, let's look at summary tasks. Pane number 4, summary tasks. And you may think, this isn't such a pain. I know what summary tasks are. I've got summary tasks and subtasks under them and link things to them. But I want to show you a couple of things within summary tasks that should make your life easier. Again, it'll make it easier to find things, to highlight things, to filter some things out. Now, what I mean by that first statement, make sure your subtasks aren't summary tasks. A lot of times when you're creating a project from scratch, maybe you get it from your WBS, or you're just making it completely from scratch, and you're kind of going through and making up your project files. Sometimes those subtasks, as your schedule grows, becomes a summary task. So you want to be careful. And what happens a lot of times is you may have links between all your subtasks. So what you want to avoid is having linked summary tasks. And that's the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems I've seen, one of the biggest pains I've seen, is if you have a summary task linked to a summary task, nothing inside those two summary tasks will move. You won't be able to status, you won't be able to move anything. So that's one of those things you always want to make sure of. And that was actually when I received a schedule from somebody, and I was looking at some things, and I was looking at their logic, and I noticed, well, geez, things don't move when I try to status it, or if I try to push a task out. Well, it's because they had summary task links. And what you want to do, certainly, as we go back to project, is maybe I want to have a couple of new fields in here, my predecessors and successors. So what I like to do is show those fields. And I can see right here that there's nothing there, so there's no summary links. Now, I have to roll things up here, and it looks like we're okay. I won't go through the whole thing, but we can certainly scroll down and see. And if there's any links in there, and also those links show up as bold, so it does stand out. So we want to avoid summary links. That's the biggest thing. Those summary links will kill your schedule from actually moving. And speaking of summary tasks, another thing, again, to make things easier for you so you can find things at a later date, you're kind of scrolling through here, and I just want to show certain things. I want everything to roll up, so to speak. So my summary task makes sense, and again, this is a small file, so I don't have too many. I want to be able to roll up, so I want to have a nice hierarchy, a nice flow, so to speak. So I still receive schedules that just have summary tasks. There's no master summary here. So make sure that you have the one file here that we can roll up all the way. It's just nice to have that hierarchy for the summary tasks. Now, what I want to do is, also we can open up everything at the same time if we wanted to. It's like quicker this way. Show all subtasks. I just highlighted everything, view, outline, show all. So what I want to do is just create a quick, simple filter called hide summary tasks, and maybe you've done this, but this is kind of nice again that I want to highlight certain tasks. Maybe I just want to highlight my milestones. Maybe I just want to highlight things that are going on just for this particular month. So when you do most of these things, you don't want the summary task to show up. So I want to create a new filter. I'll just go filters, more filters. We'll just create a new, and let's call it hide summary tasks. Whoops. And we want it to show in the menu so it actually shows up when we use it again. So the field name is summary. Ooh. Now, go down here to summary. So the test is if summary equals yes, we want to hide it. So if we want to hide it, we actually say summary equals no. And save, and we'll apply. And we can see so here's all my summary tasks that I have, and if I just click on my hide summary task, well, look at that. All my summary tasks are gone, which is nice again. Let's see, let's just go a little more detailed here again. If we go back to our keystrokes, we've hit our summary task, we have some filters on, and by the way, remember the keystroke, F3, it takes everything off, so it's removed my filter. There's no filter up here anymore, and my filters are gone too. So quick, very quick and easy filter, and it's on your sheet there, what the hide summary, it's literally one line. It's just summary equals no. You want to make sure it shows, and that will hide your summary tasks, which is a nice thing to have there. All right, so let's move on to pane number 5. And this is where I said things are going to be a little different because so few of you are using 2007. For those of you who are actually using 2007, I'll go ahead and describe it. But like I said, it was such a huge leap between 2007 to 2010. Lots of different changes. The appearance changed, so to speak, too. And one thing that it made the ability to create custom views a lot easier, which again, saves you time. You're showing exactly the task you want to see. So in 2007, it's a little more complicated. I'll go through both. In 2010, life's a lot easier to create custom views. So we're going to create a custom view the old way, quote, 2007 way, and then the new way, which you're going to go, oh, and maybe those of you that are 2007 will want to upgrade to 2010. All right, so now the first step you had to actually do to create a new view is you had to create a table. So to speak, this is my table here. It has my different fields, and here's my space, so to speak, for my fields. So what we want to do is go make sure we're on the View tab, to Tables, to More Tables, and let's just choose this, and maybe we'll edit this one. And since it's already done, I don't want to go through everything. But you have to go through, and you had to put every single field. So here's my field. I start over here. Here's my ID field. Here's my task, my percent complete, duration, predecessors, baseline finish. Maybe want to add something else. I don't know. Maybe a start variance field. That looks good. If you wanted to change the title, you can certainly do that. So there's mine there. I go ahead and hit OK. And I apply my table. Now you're not done. That didn't really create the view. Like I said, there's a two-step process in 7 where you had to create the table, then create the view. So once you create the table, now I got to go back and create another view. And I want to create me a new view here. And let's see, let's just create this view here and edit it and go back to our entry. So that was my table that I called the entry example, and make sure it shows up in your view. You hit OK, apply, and there's my view with my new field. So again, 2 steps, table first, then view. Kind of a pain. That qualifies as a pain, doesn't it? So in 2010, they make your life a little bit easier. All I have to do is one step this time, which is great. Now, the one thing that you do have to do is you can't just create the view here. I do have to go to a different view called the task view here, and then I can create it, which is nice. So I'm going to actually go to the task sheet view. I will edit this, create this, my view, apply it, and I can format it a little bit differently. And notice it says task sheet, and if I just save view, that's it. I'm done. So I've saved view. Let's see. Let's just call this new example view. Real clever. And my new view is created. So that's kind of nice. Again, you just have to go to your task sheet view, and then once you're in your task sheet view, hit save, and your view's created, which is kind of nice. So again, we're customizing things here. We keep customizing. We've shown some keystrokes, showed you a filter here, showed you how to create some views, and by the way, it does make things a lot easier once you create different views, because it depends on maybe a certain manager wants to see things. Maybe you want to create views for metrics. Maybe I want to create views that don't include the Gantt chart there on the right. Whatever, I can create all kinds of different views. Now be aware this does make your file grow. So it's literally you're taking your file and you're making it grow a little bit as you keep updating your views and copying more views. But that's what we want to do. It'll make things a lot easier if you create your own custom views. So we are up to pane number 6, constraints. The title of this is called hard constraints, so maybe this is something a little bit unorthodox that you're used to, and maybe you're familiar with what a constraint is. There's a number of constraints we can certainly use in project, and you've probably heard of them. All these right here, and I'll show you here within the project file, is more or less you're supposed to use as soon as possible, which is fine. If you've ever used health metrics, or you've had to create a schedule that has to pass, quote, a health check, and DCMate is a good example. Your constraint types, 95% of them are supposed to be as soon as possible. Fair enough, and that makes sense. You want it that way, because if your tasks are as soon as possible, logically, your schedule will flow better. With your links, everything will flow accordingly. So you can establish a critical path if your links are there. So you want to create as soon as possible. Those are called soft links, by the way. The as soon as possible and the start no earlier than, those are known as soft constraints. There's another kind of constraint called hard constraints. And I've been in some project classes before where you are discouraged to use hard constraints. Oh, it constrains the schedule. It doesn't flow naturally. Well, that's not exactly the case. You can certainly use a hard constraint, and the hard constraint we're going to show you is must start on or must finish on. Now, the reason why we can use this, totally legal, is we want the project to start at a certain time. We don't want it to go backwards. You want to go back in time. So maybe for your first project file, your first task at the beginning, you want to use must start on. It holds it in place. And you want to use for the final file, must finish on. We all know you've never had a perfect schedule. Perfect projects do not exist. Maybe on paper, but not in the real world. Everything slips. Everything runs out of money. You have lots of things that move to the right, so to speak. The beauty of must finish on is that it holds it. It holds that milestone in place and doesn't move, which is what you want it to do. So you can show, as your things move to the right, that the must finish on milestone holds in place, which is certainly a good thing. And a lot of times, and what I've been taught, maybe you've heard this too, is people say, well, I want a deadline on that final milestone. I want to do a final milestone and put a deadline on that. That's fine. You can add a deadline if you want to. But what the must finish on does with that constraint, it really does show the true logic when you start running behind. The float is more accurate, and I'll show you here as we go to the file. Oh, quick plug for a nice webinar article, by the way. So you have this link that you can certainly click on. and this is by an MPUG member. Her name is Bridget Fleming, so this is her link, and she explains it a little more detail than we have time to go here, and she actually tells you in defense of hard constraints is what this is called, so it's a nice link to have. So let's go back to our project file and look at what the hard constraint is. I'm going to go back to this view, and what I want to see is a field, my constraint types. And like I said, more often than not, we have as soon as possible. And by the way, when you insert a new task, the default is going to be start no earlier than. A lot of times maybe you've heard it called SNET. So you want to make sure things are as soon as possible. So notice my start line, 9.6, and that's the start of my whole project. Again, the reason to have kind of the whole thing you can roll up to look at is 9.16. So that's my beginning. And I wanted this to have a must start on, so it holds. No matter what happens, or maybe if I do an error, it holds that project in place. So if I go all the way down, and by the way, this would take me forever if I had a lot of lines, so I should use Control G to go to the bottom. And look at that, amazing. So I go to the bottom, and I have some must finish on constraints. What that'll do, again, that will hold your project in place. If I go through here and I start tweaking with the logic, by the way, I can hit my calculate field and calculate things, and oh boy, let's just go crazy here and start messing with my dates and things and push things way out to the right. And we call this 5. Calculate that, and maybe even make it more. If we can make this way past, oh no, I've gone past. So if I go way out here, what I'm doing is it looks like, wait a minute, it's gone past my end, which is 9:30:11, but if I calculate it, it holds it into place, which is kind of what you want to do. And that's the beauty of the must finish on constraint. Excuse me. So that's kind of a nice pain to remember. And again, when you're creating things from scratch, more often than not, you want to use as soon as possible. And by the way, if I wanted to just go through here and change everything, I certainly could to as soon as possible. Now, a lot of times, instead of using deadlines to make it more accurate flow, I use a must start on in my first task and a must finish on at the end. Now, granted, if you use a lot of hard constraints in the middle of your schedule, if you want the logic to flow a certain way, kind of messes things up. So what you want to do is just use a must start on at the beginning and a must finish on at the end. All right, so let's look at another one here, another pane. All right, so milestones don't line up. And you may wonder yourself, well, what's that? What does that mean, milestones line up? So remember at the beginning when I said a certain format, we're showing a certain bar style if we're showing slips. A lot of times we want tasks to start at 8 o'clock in the morning and finish at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And that was at the beginning, that was our default, so to speak. So I wanted things to start that way, which is fine. Now I'm going to show you an example where it may look like your milestones don't exactly line up. So what we're going to look at is that. I'm going to go back to project and make sure we have our views set up correctly. Let's just look at a different view, the bar style. So this task is not done. 9:30:11. By the way, I can go right to the task, scroll to task. Now, I don't know if this comes out as clear. Let me bump this up a little bit. All right, now, let me get rid of this field so you can see it. You're like, wait a minute. I baseline 9:30:11. I'm still scheduled to start 9:30:11 and finish 9:30:11. What in the world is going on here? My milestone looks like it's two separate things. It's on the same day. That's because it's starting at 8 o'clock in the morning and finishing at 5 o'clock at night. So it looks like, and we did this because we put the slip in when we did the slip milestone, you can see this. So a quick trick for this, and this is one of those really weird things lots of folks don't know about, so this may be the price of admission for you, is to see this, I have to go and change my date format. So I have to go through here and look at not only the date, but the time. So let's see what's going on here. Well, look at that. See, I scheduled a milestone, which by definition has 0 duration. It's going to end at 5 o'clock. Well, look at that. When I baselined it, I put 9:30 and to finish 9:30. Well, look at that. 8 to 5. I'll be. So what you do simply, and maybe we're breaking some rules, but we're alleviating pain, so to speak. What I just simply do is make sure I copy that, make sure it finishes at 5 o'clock, and look at that, the milestone goes back to normal, which is good, just to undo it to show you. So again, it started at 8 o'clock, finished at 5 o'clock, and if I make everything finish at the same time, life is good again. Everything finishes on time, which is nice. So that's good. Oh, and by the way, this is kind of a pain. Frankly, I could care less about the times, but the only time I do that is when I actually notice a milestone slipped. You're like, it's kind of weird that the milestone slipped. So I've got to go back. I've got to go back to my options, fix my date format back to where we wanted it here. Let's see, where were we? Let's see, we had the day there, so let's go back to there. So you may have to reformat that, but anyway, it holds. So that's a neat little trick if your milestones don't line up. And again, you won't see this unless you have your slips and maybe you've zoomed in your Gantt chart. If you have things viewed out for a month view, you cannot see a change of 8 hours in time. So it's one of those things that's kind of nice. So that is milestones. And by the way, speaking of milestones, you can certainly mark your task as a milestone. Again, maybe you're aware of this, but any task can be a milestone and show up, so to speak, on the Gantt chart. Notice this task has 1 day duration, but I have marked it as a milestone. If I click on task information, go to advance, I have marked it as a milestone, so I can certainly do that. All right, let us go back to more pain. Pain number 8, milestones aren't statusing. Now, this is also an example and kind of a rule of thumb in setting things up. We want to set up our project files, so at the very beginning, we want milestones at the top. And on my example, I just had 4 or 5, not a big deal. But a lot of times, if your project's real big, you want 10 or 20 milestones at the top. And again, so we roll things up. All the summaries roll up nicely. So at the very top, I have my milestones. And this is another example I ran across in real time in a meeting where the manager was like, I'm looking at the summary bar, it's not statusing right, something's wrong there, and made me look stupid. But what I'm doing here is showing you so you'll alleviate your pain, so to speak. So what this is going to do, this is going to create another field, and we're going to go back to our bar styles, create a certain bar style where it actually statuses things. And we're going to do a quick formula here to show that. So let me go back to my project file. Let me go back to showing a little bit less room here. And let me just go to a different view, one that I haven't done yet. Oh. All right. So what we have here and what I want to show you is we want project to status our summary bar correctly. So what I've done, just go back to this with time, something I've showed you here, is I have a custom field And just in interest of time, I won't actually walk through. I'll just show you what this is. So what my custom field does, it's going to show me that I'm going to kind of enter the correct status date. So I want to kind of show the status date if it's not complete. If it's complete, it's going to show the complete date. So at this point, everything looks like it is statusing properly. So it's statusing up to my time now date, and so to speak. It is 6:30:10, so it's there. So it's showing my status date. So again, on the chart, you will insert a new file, and you'll copy the formula in here. And what it'll do, if it's not complete, it actually shows you what that current latest status date is, and it'll fill in that top line, which is nice. So like in our bar styles, we want everything filled in so the summary is showing our correct status. Now, the next pane, and maybe you've experienced this, is my unique IDs keep changing. And you may wonder yourself, wait a minute, a unique ID is, by definition, not supposed to change. That's the beauty of it, that you can change everything in project, you can change IDs, you can change dates, duration, whatever. But the unique IDs should stay the same, and they do. But if you use a master schedule, which a lot of times maybe you have a lot of small projects and you want to create a true IMS, integrated master schedule, where you insert a lot of subtasks, well, when you insert subtasks, those unique IDs do change, which is a nightmare. And you try to look at the unique IDs, and they're changing because it's the unique ID for that master project, not the sub-project. Well, again, I want to give hats off to another MPUG member who actually gave a little bit more detail. It could be a webinar in and of itself, actually, is the master schedule smart numbering. So here's the actual link to this. And what I'll do, I will show you an example of this and how to alleviate it. So let me show you an actual master schedule that I have to open here. Just a second. All right, so just to show you this, actually that's the field I want to hide. All right, so if you're not familiar with master projects, a lot of time, like I said, maybe you have a lot of small projects and you want to create a, quote, master file that contains those sub-projects. To do that, you simply go to your project tab, sub-project, and enter those sub-projects. So look at this. Here's my master schedule at the top, and I have my milestones at the top, which show all my milestone hierarchy, so to speak. And then I have two other sub-projects. These are completely different files that I get from other people, but I want to create one master for that. Now, what I want to do is I want to look at the unique IDs, and this is the pane. So if I click here and go to unique ID, so these smaller tasks are my unique IDs for this master file, but if I go down to my other project file, oh boy, the unique IDs blow up. And again, just to show you that this is the other file here. So here's my other file, and look how big this thing is. That is a nightmare trying to keep up with those unique IDs. So what I do, and again, here's the, I'll show you the steps. Putting in a different field. So again, I will give you the formula for this. So it's just simply to insert a custom field, right-click, insert column, you make a custom field, and here's the formula for that. And I've just entered this formula. You can certainly copy and paste it. And so what this does, this grabs the unique ID from that project file in the other project file from your sub-project and enters it. Now, What also makes life easy is the fact that I can see that these are different organizations. This organization is SED, and this organization is LM or Lockheed Martin. And what this master unique ID that I've done, it actually shows my unique ID for that sub-project, which again is really, really nice. So maybe you have experienced this where your unique IDs change. The unique IDs do change when you have master projects versus sub-projects. So the way to alleviate that is to put in this formula, and you have actually shown those unique IDs, which is nice. So again, if I want to find something, Control F, and I want to go to my unique ID field, I can click there and find that specific field. So that's another example of that pane. Close that out. Oh no. Back to my regular example. Now, I don't know how often you have created macros. I'll admit, I am not a Visual Basic guy. I have a little program experience, not much. But what I want to show you is a really cool, quick macro that makes life a lot easier. And what this is going to be something called the count macro. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to show actually to walk through and do it, but I've given it to you on your slide. Let me just show it real quick. And this is simple, very simple. Even if you have no macro experience, all you have to do is copy and paste this. Now, the count lines is just going to be the title of your little subcode, so to speak. That's what your macro is. Literally, you copy and paste these 4 lines and it counts. And that's going to make life a lot easier trying to find things. Because a lot of times, management will ask me, well, how many tasks are done? Give me a minute, sir. Let me highlight this. Let me filter this. Let me copy. Let me paste to Excel. Let me count it there. 330, okay, because I had to copy and paste. Well, if you have that macro, I can simply go to my macros for my count, and notice I have my filter on. And what that does, it counts it really quick. So that's very, very nice, so you don't have to copy and paste. And once again, it is just a simple count, 4 little lines, put it in as a macro, and it counts. So there you can see there's my count, so to speak. And by the way, using your keyboard shortcut again, if you hit F3, everything goes back to normal, which is nice. Ooh, we are running out of time, so we have 2 more panes, and maybe I'll run through those real quick to kind of finish up. Not enough screen real estate. This is a pain I've dealt with many times. I worked on a job once where they only gave me just a laptop, and trying to do Microsoft Project on a little 13-inch laptop was a complete nightmare. So what this does, this allows you to view your project in 2 windows, which is nice. And you may be asking yourself, well, wait a minute, Word does this. I can do Word in one window, look at the same document in another window. PowerPoint, Excel works that way. But Project doesn't for some reason. So let me show you a quick trick how to do that. I just call this the 2-monitor trick. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up something here in my 1 monitor. And I guess it'd be nice if you can actually see it. I open this. So here's my monitor. You can see this is the web. I can open something up in here. Now, that's the trick. I open it up with my monitor. So if I click Browse and I go to my file, now I want to change that to all files. So I actually see where my project file is. Click OK. We'll open. Say OK. Macros. Worry about that. All right. Now, no trick. This is This is the real deal. It's the same file. Now I understand you can't see both my monitors, so I wanted to show this is my same file in my other browser here. So this is nice when you're trying to compare, and I know there's a compare function you can certainly do, but this is nice. It's a good trick to open up my same file in both windows. So maybe I want to look at and compare. You can certainly open up two different files if you wanted to. I want to open up last month's file and look at this month's file. So open up last month's file in Project and open up this month's file in my browser. And again, it is simple. All you do is File, Open, Browse. Just make sure you change Web Documents to All so you can see your project, and you literally do open up a new file in your browser. So I am running over a bit. I want to get back to a last pane, dealing with change. Now there's lots of things. That's probably your biggest pain. I know. Quote, I feel your pain, because when you create project at the very beginning, you spend all your time. Maybe you create all your resources. You get with everybody. You status everything correctly, and all it does is change. That's all that happens is change, and we've all heard the cliche, the only constant is change, and that's true, especially in projects. So a couple of tips to alleviate that is to monitor change. I create interim baselines. Again, I'm kind of running out of time, so I can't really show that, but to create that you know that you can monitor that, so to speak. So I have my baseline file, and as things change, I do some different interims. So maybe I do my start 2, my start 3, and I monitor my change, so to speak, this way. So that is how I deal with change. It's still a pain, and frankly what I do is I save everything. As I make different files, I save everything, because you may want to go back to another file. But probably the easiest way that I deal with change is to keep up with all the changes. And again, it goes back to what we did before. Make sure you have your bar styles set up correctly. Make sure you can see your slips, and you can compare and contrast to previous projects. And it looks like we are at the noon hour. I don't know if I want to turn it back over to Kyle. And are there any questions? Are people still listening? Or?
Oh yeah, we're still here. If you'd like to close out, we don't really have time for many questions. I know you were sharing your email, and we also have the MPUG discussion forum as well. So I know we've had a few questions come in about the shortcuts and some of these tricks, and you know what's available for the attendees.
Okay. Yes, and like I said, you're not going to just get the project file. You're not just going to get the slides. I'm going to literally give you PDFs with these things. So you have a list of the keyboard shortcuts. You have a list of especially the detailed stuff, because it's kind of hard to kind of see what I'm doing, go back and forth. So you actually have all those. And if you don't receive them, email me. I'll certainly be glad to give you those. And if you have other questions, I know some other questions came up. It's like, wait a minute, can you do that again? Or I have this pain, or this happens. Email me. I'll be glad to answer them.